Thank you all for joining us today for our Insights and Impact July review. So before we get started, I wanted to take a minute and reflect. Across the country, our communities, we know that everyone is hurting, from devastation of natural disasters to the collective pain we continue to feel as we move towards the struggle of being an equal society. Plus, on top of that, a pandemic. So our hearts are heavy as we think about our communities in Iowa, California, Texas, Louisiana, and Wisconsin. And we see the work you are doing to support your communities, the resources you provide after things like wildfires or hurricanes, and your dedication and your work for inclusion and diversity. We just wanted to take a moment to recognize you all and say that we're thankful for the work that you do for your community, and we are here to support you. And as we can, let us know. And we hope that today we can have a discussion about how we can continue to grow and recover during this time. So thank you all for joining us. I'm excited to talk about some of the insights that we have. Before we dig in, I wanted to just do a little bit of housekeeping. So all participants have been muted to cut down on background noise. That's pretty standard in webinars, but something that isn't is that we want this to be really interactive and beneficial for all of you. So as we go through, we're going to be talking about a couple of different bucketed topics based off the report. And we really want you guys to send your thoughts in the chat. We want this to be interactive. We want to share all of the great work that you guys are doing and plan to do towards the fall. So get ready to chat in and get engaged. So on that note, we'll go ahead and get started. Now more than ever, you guys need insight into how the movement in the health and wellness industry at large is recovering. In order to do that, you really need access to a trusted source of data to make sure that you have insight into compare yourself to, as well as to see how you guys are trekking along in recovery. And that's why we launched our Insights and Impact report. So at the beginning of COVID-19, we got a lot of questions of how are we comparing to the industry at large? How is my YMCA or JCC recovering? What do check-ins look like across the industry? And we were able to provide that data, whether it be on a page that was updated weekly or some videos that was sent out by our CEO Ron, but we wanted to provide a report in a very concise way that you guys could rely on every month, and that you guys could track and have some dependability on what different KPIs you would receive each month. We launched this in June. And then we have we've launched our second version in July. It's our Insights and Impact report. And we intend to iterate off of this and improve. So as we continue to produce this, please feel free to share impact, insight, and feedback. If there's a specific area of data that we're missing the ball on that you know that we could provide, please do. But just a quick summary as to what this report is and what we'll dig into is, as you know, we work with YMCAs. The team that's talking to you today is the nonprofit team dedicated to YMCAs and JCCs. We also work with some people across the health and wellness industry at large, and we were saying we are able to track trends across the industry. We should be providing that because you need to see how the movement's recovering, how maybe boutiques are recovering, how clubs are recovering, and be able to compare yourself and learn from each other. So this is the stats you're seeing here are combined statistics across the full industry based off of our Daxco family of brands. And then we have a report specifically for our YMCAs. And really what we're going to spend today talking about is the trends for July and in June. And we have our data guru and business intelligence expert, Constance Miller, has joined us today. We're going to be picking her brain. We had also intended on having Saranda West, our product manager for nonprofit, our director of product for nonprofit, join. She had something come up last minute, but we are also going to filter in some feedback. So if you have questions specific for Saranda, please feel free to send them in as well, and we'll make sure you get that. And then Allison Farrell also is going to moderate our chat when we have that discussion section. So you'll be hearing from her, and we're gonna go ahead and dig in. So welcome, Constance. We're excited to pick your brain.
I'm always happy to have this conversation anytime we want.
Perfect. So the first section we're going to dig into is revenue. So we have a couple of sections in the report. We have revenue, check-ins, membership, and then registrations. So revenue is at the top because we know that's that number that you just are going to immediately ask about. It's a really strong health indicator. So I'm going to kick off. We see here that in June, what most of this report is comparing to 2019. So what does June look like in 2020 compared to June of 2019? And wanted to see, we have this comparison for June and July, and I wanted to start by asking you, Constance, can you explain kind of how we calculated this number and what all is included in gross revenue?
Yeah, I think you asked a very important question, which is essentially like, what does this mean and how can I think about this? So what this means is that this is truly the totality of any revenue source, whether it be membership, program, pledge. We even have miscellaneous revenue in there. For those of you who use DAX operations, you know that there's other ways where you can have credits or debits or simply money move through the system, in addition to kind of the traditional avenues of the big three, right? The memberships, the program fees, and if you use operations for fundraising, pledge is lodged. So this is truly that and the miscellaneous fees together that are appearing in the June 1st to June 30th, and then July 1st through July 30th as they are recognized in the system. And so what you're seeing here is the movement, of course, across months of that totality, what it looks like where we were in June, where we were in July, and that percentage back to normal. And you said it well, Christy, is very much like, how do I think about it, not just on the year, but what does a normal June look like? So the other piece of the calculation to know is, hey, this is any credit essentially that is coming in through operations. But the calculation of that percent back to normal is truly for a typical June. Same information compared to that, and then for a typical July.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think one thing here is that while it isn't exactly where we want it to be, that we are able to pull out some highlights and really dig in to see, okay, this is what it looks like across the movement as a whole, across all of our YMCA customers. What are some areas based off of revenue size, and where maybe some opportunities to see potential growth or recovery?
Yeah. So as you can imagine, there's many different ways where we can segment this data. And one of the most common both requests, but also helpful ways to look at it is to segment by revenue. So I just want to acknowledge that there are other ways to segment this information that we know is important. And really the quickest, really meaningful way that we can kind of group YMCAs together is an approximation of size. So that's really what you see here, broken out by typical operating revenue. So you'll note that there's some variance right away, right, where we can see kind of the biggest percent losses are not quite back to normal, so to speak, for typical, are happening in our larger associations compared to the smaller one. And there's a couple, as you kind of go through, number of locations, and in addition to revenue, those two things, as we kind of often know, move together. As well as another important piece to think about is the larger an association is, the more likely they are to be in a more densely populated area, or fancy way of saying a city, an urban area. And so we have certainly seen, I think it's probably no surprise to anyone listening today that closures of COVID-19 related closures and other financial impacts have certainly hit urban centers at a greater degree in terms of how long there may be closures, reclosures, how many people that's affected. So that's certainly something to keep in mind as we kind of look at the segmentation. Certainly, there are examples of suburban locations that are large as well. And so really, as you think about the size of your association and maybe what you see reflected here, we're commonly seeing that all of that is moving together and impacting these numbers.
Yeah, no, I think that this gives a strong view to see kind of if I were to look at this every month and I am a YMCA that's 4 million, I can go in and kind of compare how I'm comparing, at least on a larger scale, as that resource. As you'll see here that I think that this is an interesting call out, that the 3 to 9 million breakout group had a little bit more growth compared to last month, and I wanted to dig in and see what's making up that revenue size, because I think as we think through towards fall and we're thinking through new ways to generate revenue, we can see where some areas are growing. So this graph breaks out composition of revenue by revenue size, and wanted to pick your brain, Constance, on if there's anything here that really stands out to you, or is different than, after having worked with WISE for so long, than what you would have expected.
Yeah, so I think really the headlines here are two really important things. And one is that we know that seasonality is typically impacting things like programming. So if you look at these membership percentages of revenue compared to what would typically be camp and childcare and program revenue, goes without saying that the programming registration cycle and therefore revenue cycle was completely disrupted this year, and then in many ways reimagined, right? So certainly what's reflected in the revenue for those larger associations, and I don't only want to say large, this is happening all across the movement, being an emergency childcare responder, where you may be offering program, but you are not very much mission driven, not collecting revenue on that program, that can often be at play. So sometimes a really important headline to this is that the registrations, while typically moving very closely with revenue, have a little bit of a non-typical disconnect, where we're going to see higher, for instance, childcare is open, but the revenue for it is down. And I think probably everyone on the phone is not surprised to hear that. And the other piece of the headline for this is definitely like the type of programming that you're offering and when that registration went on or offline, so to speak. So we certainly know that, and I know we're going to discuss this moving forward, programming itself has been reimagined. So what it means to offer a program, where you offer it, obviously virtual, is something to look into. And then the way that you are offering the programming and whether or not you're charging for it are all kind of moving pieces to the revenue picture.
Awesome. We do have a question, and I think it's a good point to clarify. Gina asked, what are you considering back to normal revenue? Is that last year actual or last year budget?
Yes, that is last year actual. So this would be recognized revenue.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that people may notice and may have questions about is that there is just this other bucket that seems rather large. And one thing that you might notice is that donations doesn't have their own breakout. So typically, like, the other and donations are bucketed in. But I think pledges is something important for us to dig into, especially now. So let's take a look at how pledges are recovering back to normal based off of July of 2019.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So if we think back a couple slides ago to where the revenue recovery has been slower across, it's almost, not quite, but it's almost reversed. In this case, you see higher instances compared to last year of fundraising, the larger the association gets.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a different, like you said, reverse in what we had been seeing with other trends, which is interesting and to keep in mind. This has been great. So what we'll do, and this is kind of how the cadence of the rest of the webinar will run, is we're going to give everyone kind of an opportunity to brainstorm together. So these trends are great, but now what? we kind of have an opportunity to share some of the things that your team is doing or some ideas you might have that you want us to talk through. So we'll go ahead and take this time. We'll give you guys about 20 seconds, chat in some of your ideas of ways that you want to really reimagine new ways to drive revenue that you hadn't been thinking of, specifically during this time of recovery. So we'll give you guys about 20 seconds, and then we'll have Allison read out some of the takeaways. All right, Allison, any call outs coming in?
Yeah, so we're seeing, let's see, lots of different options for childcare, lots of virtual membership, supporting school, students and teachers with modified schedules or remote learning. So, I mean, I know that we've seen that at a lot of different organizations. So continue, that's definitely reimagining revenue. Let's see, an increased, as you mentioned, increased emphasis on donations. So so making sure that all of your fundraising efforts and really targeted campaigns are out there and you've got those running. But yeah, I think virtual memberships looked like it was the most widely adopted way to reimagine revenue. So thank you for chatting those in.
Yeah, definitely. I think I specifically like the idea because we're hearing virtual memberships a lot, but supporting schools and students and teachers with modified schedules. I think we'll dig into that a little bit more later on when we talk about registrations. But I think something that the YMCA's are so unique in, and you guys know this, is that you guys are built to serve emerging needs in your community, and this is something that we've not seen before, of like daytime childcare, daytime learning, in partnership with your schools, is definitely a new opportunity for serving your community and then also potential revenue growth. Thank you guys for chatting in. That was great. So next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to shift gears and look at some check-ins. So check-in numbers, while they may seem low, actually tell a really positive story. So when you first think, oh my gosh, 31% back to normal for last year, you're going to probably, that's not exactly where we want to be, but the world is what it is. But some things that we really like to call out is that we are increasing month over month those check-ins. So you guys have just done tremendous work to get your members back in the door safe. And so I wanted to dig in a little bit more, Constance, and talk about how you calculated these check-ins, because check-ins are a little bit different now, especially with some of the recent product enhancements, and what all is included in that number.
Yeah, that's a great question, because at the heart of it is, what does it mean to be open? I think previously, leading up to COVID, check-ins meant open, and open meant the physical doors were open. And so part of what's included in this calculation leading up to this was very much physical check-ins. And I think, either whoever it may be, like sometimes we were seeing low numbers of check-ins, or we were talking to Ys who were doing test openings. Right. And so it is truly any check-in logged in operations, and that is now inclusive of the ability to do virtual check-ins. So part of the reason why we are seeing this growing is since now that's completely possible, and certainly the way that some associations have chosen to track, like this is our new definition of open. Our physical doors may be opening or closing again and then reopening later. We are always open in some sense. And so those check-ins are really inclusive of any way that your association is choosing to track that activity in operations is being included as a check-in in this count, whether it is physically in person or whether you're choosing to log virtual check-ins.
Awesome. I wanted to look at a comparison of month to month, because I think we kind of have expectation of what that looks like, but I think this does tell a great story of recovery and kind of continued growth. Can you walk us through anything interesting as your data mind looking at that people should be considering?
Yeah, so absolutely, two things pop out here to me, which is, well, three, I should say. The first one is the curve is not surprising. Everyone knows what happened in March and April. We're all experts in that. That does not need commented on. But two things to really note here are the lines in terms of the order of size. So I don't want anyone to squint and have to read the legend there, but sincerely what you're seeing is that our smallest associations and our largest associations are actually grouping together in this behavior, which kind of goes back to what we were saying. We were talking about revenue in terms of where these associations are located, how they are handling check-ins, and you'll see like that everyone kind of experienced the same drop, same pause, and then we're seeing kind of a different output, so to speak, for lack of it, when you look at May to follow who is logging the most volume of check-ins. So if we have that golden line, which you see are the smallest associations who are serving their communities, just comparatively, right? They are way up there. They're making up, they're grouped toward the top of our total number of check-ins. And that says a couple things. It really speaks, Christy, you spoke earlier about serving your community. I think as again, we are speaking to the experts on this call in that they often are the main source of support for health and wellness in their community service, in addition to maybe, the medical professionals in their town. That oftentimes is what is available for families in the community who need access to resources or need access to wellness options, however that may be defined in terms of programming or in terms of just coming into a facility. We certainly know that since WISE provides such wonderful services, such as diabetes prevention and silver sneakers and all sorts of programs that we're very familiar with, that is definitely part of what is influencing this number. So you're seeing a combination of where it's located, kind of like how great that need is, and also I will call out two other trends. One is we definitely are seeing higher rates of closures the more urban the area is. So, and less rates comparatively the less urban or the more rural an area is. So these associations may have an opportunity to open their doors that other size associations don't have currently from a physical door opening standpoint. The one last piece I will say is that we've heard from several associations where they may be open, but they're not opening every facility to take a check-in. So you may be serving your community and you may have only chosen to open a few locations or a few branches.
Awesome. I think that is such an interesting story. Because I mean, when I first looked at this, I was shocked that the yellow line was so close to that the larger sized Ys. So what are some ways that we can kind of take that knowledge, and wanted to take some time to brainstorm again as a group, knowing that we check-ins can be different. Check-ins, just like you guys mentioned, could be virtually tied. They could be a silver sneaker person calling in saying that they did their workout and they are virtually checking in. So wanted to take some time to brainstorm again. So get ready to chat of ways to reimagine that check-in experience. It could be more some things that you guys are doing to kind of reassure your members that the ones that are coming in, that they're safe, they are taking their precautions, or ways to engage with those members outside of the facility to make sure that they are getting that check-in recognition. So I'll give you all about 20 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and talk through some of those trends.
Okay, we've gotten some good chats. So let's see, we've said we've gotten virtual, or we do virtual check-ins based on Zoom logs, which is a super creative idea. All members who visit are required to check in, whereas before it was optional. But I do love the virtual check-ins based on Zoom logs. And we've also got, let's see, so doing health scans and making sure to record those with Weld, which is interesting. Limited capacity, so making sure that that there is no that people can reserve space or reserve time. Making sure signage is really prevalent throughout your facility. I know I see those all the time in the grocery store. I popped in there this morning, had to follow the arrows to get baby food, and yeah, virtual check-ins again. So I think that number one, the virtual check-in, and then also just making, you know, all of the safety precautions, health screening, limiting capacity, and really prevalent signage, I think were the biggest trends.
Yeah, I think calling out that limited capacity approach to keeping people safe is a wonderful point to highlight when looking at the check-ins themselves, because sometimes the goal isn't to be back at full capacity, it's to open safely. And opening safely means limiting check-ins by virtue of doing that. So I think that is a very important point.
For sure.
And I think that one idea with the Zoom check-in, that's so creative, as people do like group fitness online.
That is very cool. I like that
realm. So thank you guys for chatting in. That's some great ideas.
We actually did just get a question. Do active units include silver sneaker memberships?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. Active units do include silver sneakers memberships unless you have designated them as on hold in operations. So we certainly see some associations making different membership decisions there, which is a really important distinction to kind of, for comparison. It is sincerely like the choices each association has made to either keep certain units on hold or move them to active or keep them active. Anyone designated as not on hold or not terminated would be counted as an active membership. Yeah.
Awesome. So on that note, as we talk about memberships, the next topic we'll dig into is just general membership trends. So you'll see here, as we probably know across the board, memberships have taken a hit. COVID continues to be the prolonged problem. So what are some ways that we can readdress that? And I think I'm excited to hear your thoughts as we get to that conversation piece. But before we dig into that, Constance, you just touched on it, but is there anything else that people need to know when they see these numbers and understanding what all is included when calculating it?
Absolutely. So I think it is a good transition from the previous answer. Active units, so there's 3 ways to think about grouping members, which is I'm active today. So I'm on hold. I'm still there. Excuse me for the outside noise if you can hear it. I'm active today, or I haven't left. I'm still there, but I'm on hold, which is another status, which does impact this percentage. Or I have become inactive. I am no longer a member of a Y. I would have to rejoin or be reactivated to be considered a member or have a membership with the Y. So this is truly active memberships, which is an important score to keep track of, so to speak, because as we know, on hold units do not incur revenue. So part of the reason of separating those out is to say on a given day, or a given month in this point, if we were, and we know associations are making different decisions around this, and we certainly see within the month, that's one thing I would want to say, within the month, we see movement between active and holds and still continue to do so more than we ever have, not surprising. But at the end of a month, where did we settle? So we know that movement happens all the time. Where did we settle kind of at the truth of where were we at the end of July? Where did we settle with all that movement in terms of counting active members at the truth at the end of June? And this number has been, creeping downwards since COVID, even when you take into account on and off holds. So one of the interesting things to note, though, is that since this is year over year, I think it's going to be a very important number to watch moving moving forward. So that's one thing I do want to call out, is that this isn't the score right here, since we're comparing to last year, of, hey, 83% of your members are still with you from pre-COVID. That's a very good insight, which Ron kind of spoke to in some of his webinars leading up to this. This one is the what percent back to normal are we in membership? So really looking forward, the recovery number. And so what this really tells us is that there's still movements with holds, terminations are still increasing. And so we were a little bit closer to back to normal in June than we see in July as time's going by.
That's great. That's important insight, because we had been providing that number of the pre-COVID, but the reality is, and you all know this, is that seasonality is such an important piece of calculating that. So what your February number was isn't necessarily great to compare to June. So
especially with that January join effect, which we were fortunate enough to experience. Yes, correct.
Great. So let's dig in a little bit by revenue size. So you'll see here the comparison of 2019 active units to 2020 active units by that revenue size breakout. I think there's not a ton here other than what we have already kind of expected based off of the revenue comparison, but any major call outs here?
Yeah, I think the headline again continues to be higher population areas. And so there's a higher likelihood of churn. There's also, as we're seeing again, the larger the association, the more we've seen members kind of go and stay on hold. So it could be, as you look at these numbers, to think about your association's own membership strategy in terms of retention, engagement, moving people on hold or not. We're definitely seeing some of those decisions being made differently, both based on location and size. So some of this is just there's more members in typically larger areas, and some of it is different decisions around moving and keeping members on hold.
Yeah. Molly asked in the Q&A, does your active number include staff or silver sneakers for those associations that include them as active units, even though they are not paying units?
Yes. And so that is where the important thoughts on that is where looking at both kind of the active count to the revenue, that story together is where you're going to see that difference. So maybe my membership has stayed up high, but my revenue has dipped. That is the difference there. I will say we do have some options if you use certain solutions that we provide to this, to include or exclude that number as you like to count for your association. We have some associations who want to keep silver sneakers in. We have some who very much want to not include them in the count. So this is truly agnostic in the sense that it is, if your association is keeping them active, then they're in this active count. If they're not, then they are not. And then you will see that. Do I have a zero pay membership? It's kind of the difference as we were speaking earlier with revenue and kind of giving a nod to childcare registrations may be up, but childcare revenue may be down because it is lower no cost provided. It would be very similar story to unit counts and membership revenue.
Perfect. Next thing I want to dig in here, because active units aren't the only piece of the membership story. So there's a lot to unpack in this chart, but it tells an interesting story. So if you can, you'll see here that we break out active units, new joins, renewals, holds, and terminations. Yeah. What are some of the big takeaways that you wanted to make sure people notice?
It is hard to look at a table with a more than 1,000% increase and not call that out, even though there are some other things to mention. So in the last graph, one of the pieces, of course, was that I already spoke to, but just to put a fine point on it with that really big percentage number, is that the larger the association, the more holds that we were seeing. And not only the more holds that we were seeing, but keeping on hold. I think we've seen a lot of holds movement back and forth, or certainly more holds earlier in the COVID cycle. But right now, still very large. The data is bearing this out. The larger the association, the more likely they are to have a higher percentage or higher number of holds. And so this is very much a reflection of that. And you can see from the corresponding data next to it why that would make why that would make sense. So if you're a large association and you're experiencing a lower number of renewals and a higher level of terminations, everyone's experiencing a higher level of terminations, but an uncomfortable level to that amount, as well as a lower number of joins, it is not surprising that based on the service area, where that's located, their likely closure impact to COVID, and this kind of slow of comparatively greater slow of renewal, slow of joins, comparatively higher terminations, where there would also be a higher number of holds. So all of these levers move together is really the way that if I'm looking at this and you're kind of zeroing in on your row, other than that big number, that is the headline. These levers move together. So you'll just simply see kind of the personality, so to speak, of the choices in terms of how we keep our members active. And by active, we mean with us, stay with the why, what the strategy is to do that. And then really what it's been in terms of the fact, I do just want to call it another bright spot on here, joins are happening. So that join percentage is, I mean, we always want that to be higher. We want it to be higher year over year than the year previously, but they are still happening. And so I think what you're really seeing is just taking into account the reality of the renewal rate, the reality of the join rate, the reality of the termination rate, what that means each kind of grouping of association has therefore done with a retention strategy, with an active member strategy, and with a hold strategy.
Awesome. I think that is a great call out, because it can be easy to focus in on some of the negatives, but the fact that new people are still seeking you out and identifying the why as a place to find value and take on that next step in their health or community journey is exciting to see movement there, given everything else going on. On that note, wanted to transition into our time to chat in and reimagine membership. And I wanted to kind of to broaden this, because when we think reimagine membership, I think naturally go to virtual, because that has been our option, and it still is definitely something we need to explore. And I think you guys know this, but what are some ways that you guys have really invested and continue to provide value to your members during this time to make sure that they have that membership connection, and really reimagine what used to be an in-person interaction? What does that look like now? So I'll give everyone a couple of seconds, and then we'll go ahead and dig in.
I have to say, watching her do that makes me want to go try it. It's a good commercial.
My husband has one in the backyard he's been using a lot. Let's see. So continue to chat in if you've got ideas. What we're seeing, oh, I love this. Monthly chats with the CEO. So state of the J updates, new programming to come, updates on closed areas. I love that idea of a monthly chat, and a monthly, just a good touch point to engage people. Let's see, we'll continue to see, again, virtual membership. That's a big one. As we said before, this one's interesting, mobile app engagement. So just trying to get people connected with our mobile app, and sending out information that way. But yeah, I mean, virtual is definitely one of those big trends, but I love the idea of a monthly chat with your CEO or your leaders, to give out those updates and give, a nod to any new programming that you've got coming up, especially as we get into, I think, the fall season and the things that you're able to offer, whatever programs those are. Giving a quick update on those, or if there are updates on kind of your areas, I think that's, or even continuing to educate them about what we talked about with check-in, of all those things that you've put in place to entice them to come back. So definitely just staying in touch and keeping them engaged, top of mind, but virtual and mobile engagement, and then those updates from the CEO. Those are kind of what we saw. So
yeah, I really like that the theme there, everything that was shared is is open lines of communication, right? Like closer and open lines of communication.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you guys. That was great. The last area we're gonna dig into today, and you'll notice this in the report as well, is registrations. So we've broken them out into childcare versus program registrations, and they are down compared to compared to last year, but I would say these are some of the healthier comparisons. Wanted to kind of kick us off on this subject. Constance, you do a really great job, and we've hinted at this of talking about the seasonality of registrations. What did these numbers tell us?
Well, there is an interesting story to this one. So we know, and the June report adds to this too. So I'm just going to give a shout out because that's on the website as well to check. You'll actually see that some of this was even higher in June. And still, as you said, compared to some of the other kind of pieces that we have for July, comparatively back to normal. So if we compare it to membership, if we compare it to revenue, if we compare it to the other pieces, the seasonality effect really is that we broke the summer, COVID broke the summer program registration cycle. So that seasonality, the rhythm that we're all very familiar with of get ready to register for spring programming, get ready to register for if you've got spring break programming, if you are registering for all your summer camps or childcare programming, et cetera, that we are very familiar with these kind of school year and seasonal rhythms of when we open for registration, when the programs are, when the next opening is. All of that rhythm was completely disrupted. And so what we were actually able to see a bit is some of the registrations are recovering at a higher rate, which is what you said, Christy, compared to where we see memberships, partly because we had kind of without calling it a wait list, there was a pause on registrations, right? Or there was a wait. There were cancellations of programs earlier in the year that would otherwise have occurred, or there was a skinnying down of the programs that were available and therefore closed windows of registrations where they would normally be open. As we saw some areas of the country reopen, these registration paths reopened. And so you'll definitely see that, like in both June and July numbers, these are higher compared to the other data that we've reviewed. It may not, the headline here is that, again, it's that seasonal disruption, and we've reinvented what registration season means based on your area, based on what your Y or your J is offering at a given time or has been able to offer. That's headline one. The other piece is that this may or may not, again, be tied to revenue. Depending on what the programs are, if they're emergency response, if they're low or no fee, or if they're heavily discounted, there will be also as we kind of look at these comparatively better, comparatively back to normal rates, that doesn't necessarily correlate to revenue, depending on what the program is.
Perfect. Yeah, I remember thinking last month, we don't have this up here, but the childcare registration was over 100%.
It was
like, we're back, and realized that it was just the time of month. It's still great numbers, but
yes,
just July, June doesn't typically see a ton of camp registrations because they do earlier.
Well, and if you want to know how important all of the programming that services are, the fact that like the month they were able to be essentially an option, it was more than last year. So if you want a happy takeaway to go get the June report off the website, you will see an over 100, I think it's 103. My memory, don't hold me to that. I can check. I like to check my numbers, but, and it was truly due to like, we stopped. And then when it was able to be started again, there was that community response of, I need this. This is obviously valuable to me. Can I register for that at a comparatively higher rate to last year?
Awesome. Let's dig into the comparison by revenue type. So I think this is also a helpful view. So you'll see here the childcare and camps versus programs. And anything here that you wanted to kind of call out?
I mean, emergency response. This is the stories that I think probably everyone listening today is very familiar with. And it's just, I want to thank everyone on the call for them and for sharing them and for offering this, is that you'll see these registrations, as we mentioned, This is not something to drive revenue. This is to serve the community. There is a need, and the Ys and the Js met it when and where they could, and oftentimes that was not surprisingly in childcare. So one thing to note that's very interesting about this table is that you'll just note two things moving separately. In childcare and camp, the larger the Y typically, you'll see there's a bit of an exception at the bottom. I can come back to that, but the larger the Y typically, the higher this number, or the J. And then same for program, that's reversed though. And oftentimes, again, that is because the larger associations were in a position to be able to, for several reasons, offer that emergency response, expand their childcare offering, or be creative with their childcare offering to meet first responder needs, to meet families' needs. Certainly, many, many different stories as to why that would be the case. And then with that was the priority, like over what would be more traditional programming. I will say why you see programs getting higher, and also again, camp and childcare and programs at that 0 to 3 million. This goes back to kind of the headline that is looped back to several different data stories, which is those smaller organizations are often incredibly needed to serve their communities right now, and there are fewer other community options in those areas. They're also, again, anecdotally have been allowed to stay open when some of our larger areas have not been. So there's a combination of ability to open and ability to serve in terms of the movement that we see in each column.
Yeah. We did have one question from Stacy who asked, is the registration number pulled off of the registration date or the program date?
That's great.
The reason being is they were canceling and registering some participants in order to give them partial credits.
Yes. So sometimes registration rates truly is in terms of like when the registration is, and I keep saying this, but whenever your association has recognized that registration and operations. So if I register for a program today and I go tomorrow, or if I register for a program today and I go a month from now, that would be the same registration date. Depending on, so this is, if you're a DAX of operations user, the lovely data title is like the date registered, and then the session date would be two different ways of looking at it. So this would truly be like the I signed up.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I mean, this helps with a really great view of kind of a different story based off of where they are most likely geographically, but would love to take some time to have some people chat in. So please go ahead and chat in your ideas of reimagining childcare. This is something that I think specifically now as schools are reopening and we're moving into the fall, evolving and kind of finding some new ways to serve your communities is going to be great. So we'd love your ideas. We do plan on talking about this more and bringing on some of our customers on to speak to how they are at a deeper level. But in the meantime, please send some of your ideas of ways that you're reimagining your programs in childcare for the new needs of your community.
We got this was for the last section, but I think can definitely apply here. So Karen said we started our Y Engagement Solution Center, so all calls that would normally come to branches come to our YES Center, so it's easier to give the same information and work with them to do items online. Weekly emails from Engage for how to be healthy at home, which include classes, projects for children, and engaging with members. So definitely a really good series to have, and a good solution to that with their Y Engagement Solutions Center. That they kind of took that what people would try to get in the in-person or in the branch, and then they were able to pivot and have that in that one centralized center.
That's awesome. Thank you, Karen, for sending that in.
Mm-hmm. And just to shout out Gina and Brenna who've been chatting in things too. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for offering that. We appreciate all the ideas that we have had so far. So if you want to get an idea in or want to shout out even what you've seen has worked well for you, please send that in. But let's see. Oh, let's see. So Michelle said we had to change our B&A program to a full day program as all the districts we serve went to fully
Yes.
remote learning. So it's affected us
Yes.
tremendously, and our registrations are nowhere near 68% of last year, but that's how we've had to change to serve the community. So I think
Yeah.
that's another great example of you see a need in your in your community of and we I saw that even locally of just when schools are only doing remote, or they are only they're only offering one type of of learning situation, that there's a lot of need out there, and there are parents that are really trying, really struggling to figure out how they're going to continue to work and continue to provide a good engaging day to their kids. So I think that's absolutely a need that has been out there, and that's been continuing to be filled by all of your organizations.
Yeah.
But again, those common themes we've seen of the any type of the new childcare offering, daytime childcare, virtual engagement and enrichment, and those are definitely the things that we've seen work really well, and be the thing that fills the community's need.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this, everyone's needs are different. And so what used to be like most people go to school and then they go to after school. Now everyone has a different persona, and they have a different evolving need, and finding what that looks like. Because even if your town is open for school, and there may still be families who are opting into like at home homeschooling now, kind of working through that new process. And we know that you guys are thinking through this. You guys have some really great ideas. So we're going to be bringing on some of your peers in some future webinars to speak to that, because I think hearing what people are doing based off of their reopening status or some things going on is always helpful to have a discussion.
Yeah, Christy, I think you said something really important there, which is that there's always been a mix of community needs, right? Because at some level, there's always been a homeschooling community or an alternate school route. However, within the same service area or within the same community, having such wildly different, I mean, in my city, I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and depending on where you are in the county, you could be full-time school, or you could be full-time virtual, or you could be partially open, and all serviced by the same organizations. And so that is definitely something that I think is obviously pieces that our wise energies are bring a lot of thought to. It can vary so much in general, and then it can vary in the same community
Right.
based on the school or the districts represented.
Yeah. Another thing Karen had sent in is that for childcare, they're going to be opening a full day at a number of hub locations that will have virtual learning available for online school.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys so much for chatting in. And if you have more ideas that you want us to share with the group, go ahead and send them in. But I wanted to go ahead and spend the next couple of minutes to open it up for questions, because we talked through a lot of data. So feel free to send your questions in, and Constance, and I mean, I'll try, but Constance will answer a lot of the questions that you need. And in the meantime, while you guys are sending those in, just a quick announcement that this is not the one and only time we're going to have a webinar like this. We are here to be your partner and provide as much as we can to you all at your fingertips to help you through this. So this is going to be a monthly cadence. It will evolve each month. So some months we may be like today, where I'm picking Constance's brain. It may be that we have some wiser Jays come on and speak to what the data means to them, because we want to make sure we're continuing to provide you guys the insight that you need. So if you guys ever have feedback, or there's a specific area that you wish we dug into more, email marketing@daxco.com, and that will help us iterate and expand to make it the best resource we can for you, because this is something we are trying to provide for you all each month, just so that you have some touch base, because we do work with so many YMCAs and JCCs throughout the nation. If we can do this, we want to. So please send us our feedback so we can continue to improve.
Yeah, and I would add to that if you are also, excuse me, I'm not sure if you can hear that sound, but if you are also a happen to be a performance analytics user, that I would echo everything Christy just said. As I really, really in terms of the partnership, wanting to put everything in your hands that you need through like a variety of ways that you can find it depending on what you're looking for, in a way that's going to resonate most for you. So the absolute same offer of partnership and the feedback on the table so that we can make sure that if you've got access to your data and operations or performance analytics, or you're looking at insights and impact report, or all three, that it is intuitive and helpful to you how those things fit together, how they complement each other, where you can find that, and what it is that you would also like to see kind of across those ways to access insights.
Yeah. To that point, Karen asked, does this data come from performance analytics?
Yes, it does. I will say the one piece, if you are a performance analytics user, that you know is that you can segment data by different peer groups. One way that you can do that is by revenue size as well. So you'll see the difference to note there is that there's kind of an additional grouping on the insights and impact report, very minor detail, but if you wanted to look at that, and we kind of segmented the data one further for this report so that it would really resonate with the entire Y movement, with any J or nonprofit that looked at it, and the way that we know that you want to compare yourselves. In performance analytics, you will have revenue. You'll be able to say, hey, I just want to compare myself to this revenue group, and the revenue groups are going to look slightly different, but it is driven absolutely by the same data source.
Awesome. Well, the last thing we want to do before we let you all get back to your days to end on some silver linings, because some of the data can be heavy. I think that everything you guys have been feeding into the chat has been positive, forward thinking, but wanted to give you guys some opportunities, because we have a wide variety of people on the call, to send in some opportunities to kind of brag on your team, brag on maybe another YMCA or JCC that you think has done just a great job. We'll call those out on the webinars, and that's also something that we'll expand on as we go forward and kind of promote some of the great work you all are doing in your community, because we wholeheartedly support and are dedicated to furthering that mission. And so a lot of that is just promoting some silver linings that you guys are doing. So chat those in, and if you have some time, you can always send those to marketing@dexco.com, and we're going to be promoting that and celebrating all the great work you guys are doing through this time.
I know Saranda wanted to be here today, but she has had some really wonderful interviews with a lot of your peers and people in the community and in the movement through her podcast that she does. I think we had 6 episodes already. So if you want to hear from, there are lots throughout the country, just different organizations that she's had the opportunity to interview leaders from. That and a lot of it has been was focused on the way to recovery and the way to these organizations have seen that success and seen the ability to serve their communities. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. It's really, really good conversations with leaders just like you.
And if you have any recommendations for that too, I know she would absolutely love that.
Always looking for more people to interview and hear their stories. So if you are interested in being on the podcast, you can find it on Spotify and Apple iTunes podcasts. But
that sounds so official. I like it.
So if you want to listen, but if you'd like to be on it, please reach out to us, and we would love to help tell your story.
All right, well, that is all we have for today. Thank you all again for your time. If you have questions, let us know. We will be sending this out as a recording. So if you have someone else on your team that you want to share the info with, you will get that soon in your inbox. So I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And thank you, Constance and Allison, as well for everything you guys did today.
Happy to. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
See ya.